On today's episode, we're fortunate to have our very first guest. Nick Hurff is a combat veteran, performance expert, and ultra-endurance athlete. Nick and I first met in the Captain's Career Course down in Fort Benning, Georgia. He's currently the Director of Sports Performance, where he leads his strength and conditioning, nutritional coaching, and performance psychology for over 28 NCAA and intercollegiate teams. He's a graduate professor who teaches evidence-based performance enhancement. Outside of university life, Nick is a high-level endurance coach who has coached 2 world record holders. Nick also competes internationally in adventure racing, which is an ultra-endurance sport where one navigates across remote and rugged landscapes in multi-day races by mountain biking, trekking, and paddling. His small business revolves around race directing, endurance events, and endurance coaching. His company's name is Rev3 Endurance. In the Army, Nick served as an infantry officer for over 8 years in multiple roles, ranging from PL through company commander. He also served in the Asymmetric Warfare Group, 10th Mountain Division, and 1st Armored Division. He fought in Afghanistan as an uplift platoon leader with 7th and 19th Special Forces Group in Helmand Province, Afghanistan. Nick, welcome to the podcast. Thanks for sharing your time today.
Doing well, yeah, my pleasure.
Good. So we're out here in Maryland. So the topic for today is, as we alluded to, we're going to talk about mental and physical resiliency. So, Nick, how do you define mental and physical resiliency?
It's the ability to navigate adversity.
Yeah,
Both mental and physical.
and I mean, why is that important? If we're talking like high performers, special operation veterans, like why is that important?
Yeah, I mean, whenever you're in a unknown and really high consequential environment, whether that's real or perceived, being able to function at an effective level is paramount. And so being able to be resilient and face adversity and think clearly in order to make decisions is huge.
Yeah.
I think the first time I met Nick, it was during the Conquer Quest, and talking about resiliency. If I remember correctly, you were coaching a guy that was running across Florida. Was that correct?
Yeah, Hunter Leininger. He's so I flew out to LA there and linked in with you guys. I flew straight from Florida, from Jacksonville.
Yeah.
And I spent 11 days with Hunter, and he set the record for the FKT, fastest known time, for running the 1,100-mile Florida Trail. So it took about around 21 and a half days, I think. And he's currently actually starting today in Iceland. So he's going for the world record for the fastest known time from the most northern point to the most southern point of Iceland right now, which is pretty sweet. So yeah, I just saw Hunter. I just came back from 2.5 weeks up in Alaska, and so up there I was actually with Hunter a bunch, which is great. So got to hit a bunch of mountain peaks and do some big bike rides and just kind of get out there. There's a 5-day race there. I was going to race in, had a free entry from winning a big race earlier in the year. So I compete in ultra endurance adventure racing events, which are multi-modality. So anything from whitewater, pack rafting, paddling, to flat water, to mountain biking, rock climbing, canyoneering, trekking on foot. I mean, it's usually vast wilderness landscapes you're traversing. So I've done races in all over the place. Actually, be in Ecuador for about a month coming up in November.
I like what you did right there. I like how you said Ecuador, and immediately went for me. You know, that was pretty fun. Hey, I appreciate it. But the reason I brought it up, it was the physical aspect of the ultra racing, right? Like Stefan is like every month he's doing like a 30, 50, 100 miler. And then I met you on that event as well. And you were coming straight from running the swamps, supporting the guy that was running across Florida, setting up the record. And now that we're speaking about resiliency, every time we talk about resiliency or mindset or building mental toughness, the physical aspect every time comes into the topic. What do you have to say about that?
Yeah, exactly. And everybody has that inner voice, right? So that inner voice is like, oh, it's okay, like you can do it later, or oh, okay, like, yeah, I don't know if I want to do this right now, or oh man, you're slow today, or whatever that inner voice is can be negative like that, right? At the same time, though, it can be positive. And so building a positive inner monologue is huge, but there's a lot of things you can do to perform for mental performance. And so one thing that I look at resiliency is it's kind of like training physically. So physically, you have to layer on different levels of stress and then you recover from them, right? And you keep building up forward. If you layer too much stress on all at once, you can break. And the same thing happens mentally. And you see that, right? Like you take somebody who's just not prepared for, let's say, a combat situation, they're thrown into it and they panic, right? Or they freeze. That happens sometimes, right? That's that whole sympathetic nervous system, fight, flight, freeze. But same thing with adversity. You know, you take somebody who's even under chronic stress for a long time. Let's say they're stacking things. Let's say it's children, divorce, things are happening with their job. All these things start to layer on, and it can be overwhelming, and some people break. But layering on slowly over time, stress and even adversity is important. So going out and doing hard things is critical. I mean, very few people just jump into a 100-miler, right, without a background of a bunch of stuff, right? So, you know, some people do a 100-miler, but typically they've already done training runs that are, 20s and 30s and different stuff, and they've had a background of doing hard things. So really just, I would say wherever an individual is at, just start layering on harder and harder things slowly. It might be a 5K. So maybe running a 5K is your threshold. Go run a 5K and then go run a 10K and then go run a half marathon and, just build it up from there. And then before you know it, you are stacking all these things in your favor in order to build yourself up. So that's one critical aspect of layering over time.
What you mentioned about the layering part is like really important as well. I experienced that myself as well, like throughout my transition from like the regular army to special operations to Green Berets, and it seemed like repetitive. Like the deployments, like they became easier in the regular army, correct? But then I went to Ranger Battalion. The movements became longer, the loads became heavier, the runs became faster, and it was like building that mental toughness. And by the end of it, it didn't matter what it was. It was just like, okay, we're doing it, and whatever happens, it happens, and just continue to build up. But then transition into the civilian world. I go, for example, I'll take a couple friends for a run, and the first couple of miles, let's example, they fall back and they immediately completely quit running. And I think that's having the importance of like not comparing yourself to someone else and having those layers of building that mental toughness and resiliency. Because if you just get thrown into, you never done a marathon in your life and you're like, okay, I'm gonna go do a marathon. You finish your marathon in a long period of time, and then you probably will never do it again, right? Because you think it's okay, I did a marathon, never do it again. Instead, if you trained up for the marathon and you continue to progress and stop comparing yourself from the guy to the left and right, you're building your own mindset. You're not trying to beat the other guy. You're trying to beat you. You're trying to beat the old you. So I think that's a really, really important fact that you mentioned. It's like, hey, bring it up to layers. Like you mentioned, it was like, hey, your threshold might be a 5K. Your threshold might be 3 miles, fucking 10 miles, instead of doing the 100 miles. But having those layers, it will eventually become longer and longer. You're going to continue to break that threshold. Now you know what you're capable of.
That's beautiful. Yeah, that's beautiful. And a huge thing that you had mentioned also was that you get to the point to where you're just like, yeah, whatever it is, I'll do it. I'll figure it out. And there's that self-efficacy that you build. That self-efficacy and that confidence that whatever it is, I'll get through it. And that's what, I've noticed with, I've noticed with the adventure races I do, they're multi-day, hundreds of miles and nonstop, and just through, it's not like it's like, oh, flat terrain that I'm just kind of pedaling on. It's like, no, like I'm pushing my bike up a mountainside right now off trail because it's going to save me time, but it's hard and it's like pouring rain and it's cold, it's wet, whatever. And you have fun. And then it gets to the point where you're literally like having fun doing it. You're playing music or whatever. And it's like, you're in a really tough situation that a lot of people wouldn't be able to handle. but you build up to it, and it's just like, yeah, whatever it is, I'll figure it out. And that translates over into other aspects of life. So when it comes to businesses or different things, it's like you kind of develop that growth mindset because you see yourself develop, and then that translates elsewhere. And so, for businesses, like a podcast, right? You guys probably were like, hey, let's do a podcast. You probably have never done one. And you're like, well, let's figure out how to do it. And it's like not a big deal for you because you're just like, oh yeah, we'll do this stuff. And oh yeah, if this thing messes up or the sound system is the wrong one, like we learned a lesson and we just move forward, and there's that resiliency and confidence in that.
Yeah, right. And so when I look at resiliency, it's mind, it's body, and it's spirit, right? So having a strong back, a strong chest, etc., right? It's only going to get you so far. But if your mind is not in the game, if your spirit's not in the game, then you're not going to be able to be truly resilient. And when you look at true resiliency, it's going to be the ability to manage all three, and then maintain all three. So what are you doing to maintain your physical fitness? What are you doing to maintain your mental fitness and your spiritual fitness? So once you can control all three aspects, now you'll be able to truly be resiliency, and your resiliency threshold will increase.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are trying to build a mindset, are trying to. They usually pick the running. They usually pick, hey, I'm gonna go for running. When you start running, and there's a lot of other areas in your life that you can also as well build your resiliency. For example, Nick, you mentioned you're doing paddling, you're doing biking, you're doing running. So those are different areas where, like, hey, it's not running, but they're hard things. Like, for example, I run a lot, but as well I'm picking up another sport. I've been getting into like free diving, and I got it right after I went to dive school. And the reason was because when people go to the pool, it doesn't matter how fit you are. It's a different animal. You're underwater. You don't have control of the situation. All you can do is control your breathing. But at one point, there's only so much you can control. You're exhausted, and now you throw in the water. Now you're putting this mindset that your life is in the line. You're underwater. You're trying to survive. You're trying to build your mindset around that as well. So I started getting into free diving in order to continue to push me outside of the comfort zone. Right? You go swim a couple hundred meters into the ocean, and now you're solo by yourself trying to go 50, 30 feet underwater. And now you're building your mindset in a different way. It's like now you're solo underwater. You don't have anything. And I was like, hey, let's try to survive this. And that's something I've been doing that's actually been helping me out as well. Not only for building the resiliency, but also like building my mindset, getting clarity. And it actually helps me out stay clear. Stays like this morning I went out for a dive this morning, and I started my day around 5 a.m, and by 9 o'clock I was done with the dive, and I was ready to go on with the dive. But I want to explore other areas as well, not only physical. Like, what are other things, Nick, you think that people can do to continue to build the resiliency, taking the physical aspect out of the equation?
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of different techniques you can use that are more concrete, mental techniques. So some things you can do are, there's a lot of exercise. So I'll just kind of go on random ones, but one big thing is your self-talk. That's the biggest thing. So often we'll talk to ourselves worse than we would talk to our friend who's going through the same thing. So talk to yourself like you're your best friend. And that doesn't mean you have to lie or, anything, but just be realistic and talk to yourself. You make a mistake, that happens, right? Learn from it and keep going. And having that positive self-talk is super important. Another thing you can relate to it is, one exercise is even writing a list of like doubts or concerns you have, and then write down like, is it real or not? And then supporting facts behind it, and like what you've done to prepare for that, right? So let's say you're rock climbing, for example. The fear might be, hey, I'm going to fall and hurt myself, right? Well, you can realistically, let's say this is on something you're working on, you can realistically look at it and be like, no, like if I fall, it's a safe fall. Or you can look at it and be like, no, there's a big ledge there. Like that's a no fall spot, right? If I fall, I could really mess myself up. But so there's a yes or no, and that can help because it's like, no, like if I fall there, it's fine. Like it's a clean fall. It's good. It's fine. Maybe I'll do some practice falls, right? Another thing is like, well, how have I prepared for it? Well, this is a 5-9 climb or whatever, and I've built up a bunch of stuff. I've climbed harder things. Like I know the moves. I practiced them. I'm feeling good. So now all of a sudden you're taking these doubts that you have or these thoughts or concerns or fears, and you're starting to rationalize them physically on paper is another way you can go. And I've seen this also with even high school athletes I've used who are training for college showcases and whatnot, who sometimes have these mental blocks. And it's like, no, like lay down on paper and write a list of 10 of the things that you've done that were really successful in the last year on the field. And that helps. Or, hey, after every practice and every game, write a list of 3 things you did that were really well done. And now all of a sudden that's a good exercise, and that the individual I'm thinking of would spiral into self-doubt on the mistakes and would lose sight of all the good. And so now we're rewiring that by him going through this exercise, and all of a sudden it worked way better, and he's all of a sudden performing much better, and he's actually getting much higher interest from colleges at a D1 level, whereas before I was kind of thinking he was more at a D3 level. And so, which he still may go there, but it's like he was limited by his mental side. Another concept to think about for performance are energy levels. So how aroused you are as far as like energy, right? Are you amped up, ready to go? Are you calm and tranquil? And a key part of it is, think of it like a spectrum. Different activities require different places to be with your energy level. So if I'm, going to go deadlift for a PR, I can be super pumped up because it's an easy movement that I've done thousands of times. But if I'm that pumped up and I'm in a chess match, like I'm probably not going to do too well in the chess match, right? So you can check in with yourself now and then, especially if you're doing something high consequential or important, and think, what's my energy level? You can even do that before a business meeting, right? You're going into a business meeting and maybe you're nervous or whatever. Check in with yourself, see where you're at, and then correct. And so some ways you can correct energy level, which is probably one of the most pivotal things, is let's say you're too low energy, have some coffee, maybe do some movement to wake up, listen to music, right? Something along those lines that'll kind of increase. Decreasing is a little bit harder, right? You're nervous or whatnot. What do you do? Deep breathing exercises, box breathing, those things are super, super helpful because it connects something you can control with something you can't control in your body, right? Like I can't control my heart rate, but I can control my breathing. My breathing also is autonomic as well. So like if I don't think about it, I still breathe. So it's a kind of it's a trick to get into that other side of the mind and that autonomic nervous system and try to regulate it. You can also, do mental imagery to kind of calm yourself down. You can try to desensitize off of things. You can listen to calming music. So there's other things you can do to kind of mess with that energy level, which is critical. So I would say if there's one takeaway, identify what your energy level is, and then find a way to correct to where it's optimal for that. And you can experiment too. So for example, in soccer, my brother found that he was very successful. He needed to downregulate a lot. And so he was trying to get pumped up all the time. And he started downregulating. He performed so much better. And cognitively, he was able to focus more and did much better. So you can experiment as well. Other strategies you can use are visualization. So if you were to take, you visualize something, like let's say it's a meeting or sport, right? So we'll go back to climbing again. If I want to visualize in climbing, I'm thinking through those moves as I'm going through, and I can think through first person or third person. It doesn't really matter too much. You can kind of mess with both and you'll be natural one way or the other. But as I'm going through those motions of watching myself go through those motions or visualizing it, it's actually stimulating my nervous system a little bit to those muscles at a very minor level. And now I'm building that muscle memory. And now when I go through it, I've already been through there several times. Well, same thing, even a situation I haven't been in, like I can still visualize it. And you can visualize adversity as well in there. So let's say I'm on a mountain biking race. I visualize spinning out and falling and then getting back up and going, or all of a sudden my tail tire, spins out and I kind of catch myself, keep going. The key though is you want more success than not, because your body and your mind will remember. So go for like 80, 90% of success, and then go with like 10% adversity. And you can easily visualize like 5 minutes a day on whatever it is. And so on a physical level, it stimulates the nervous system, gets your body conditioned for it. And then mentally, like, you're already there. So let's say you have an interview, you can run through that interview several times. So maybe do research, right? See what is the company about? Who are the individuals who are going to be here? What's their background? Look on LinkedIn at them, learn about them. Maybe there's podcasts about them you can listen to. And all of a sudden you start to get a feeling of what it's going to be like. And then you can visualize through it. A lot of questions on interviews, different things, and may ask you different stuff. You can visualize that and run through those rehearsals. And now when you step in, even though it's not exactly the same, it's close. And now all of a sudden my energy level is lower. My confidence is up. I'm way more comfortable in that situation than I would have been before. Same thing with rehearsals and combat.
I'm glad you mentioned the confidence part. I'm glad you mentioned the confidence part in the interviews. Right, a lot of this podcast is meant to help out veterans struggling, coming out of transitions, help them out with mental health, and a lot of veterans that come out of the service, they're never done an interview because they've been in their whole life in the military career, to include myself, and I can relate to that the confidence part, not only in the side of the interviews, but when it comes down to physical events, right? That's why in Ranger School you have like your Ranger buddy, or in dive school you have your dive buddy. And not necessarily they're over there to hype you up or to pump you up or to motivate you, but they're there for a reason. They're there, hey man, I'm experiencing the same troubles you're having, so I know you can make it through this. And they're gonna show you a way around that obstacle, right? And I'm glad you mentioned the interviews, because that's something I relate a lot when I transitioned out of the military. I've never done a job interview before, and I knew I was going to have to start practicing and rehearsing. So I went with the same mentality that I went to dive school, that I went to range school. I'm just gonna go and do as many interviews as I can until I get it right. And that's exactly what happened when I transitioned out of the military. I can tell you how many interviews I did. And I was like applying for every job. I applied for every job out there, and I just went to the interviews. Even if the position I didn't want to, I just wanted to get interviewed. And it worked out. It worked out well. When the actual interview, the job that I was interested came in, it was it went so well that I wasn't even during the transition program, they pair you up with these coaches, and they tell you, hey, make sure you're well dressed, you have a nice suit, you're well presented, your resume, your cover letter, and all that. And this was one of the jobs that I wasn't really prepared for, but it's the job that actually worked out. And the interview went so perfect because, first of all, I was interviewed by former Army Ranger, former Navy SEAL. But on the other hand, as well, it was like I've done it so many fucking times already that I was so confident, and I boosted that confidence by actually doing the event, by actually doing the interviews. And it's the same thing with the running. Like, let's say you run a 5 mile under 40 minutes for so many times, even if you're out of shape, you're still gonna get the 5 miles under 40 minutes. So I'm glad you both mentioned that the confidence part.
Yeah, exactly. And I love the teamwork aspect you brought in. So I compete at a high level in adventure racing, which is a sport I talked about, covering vast distances, days at a time, a lot of navigation, multi-modalities. Often you're in like mountainous environments where you're just out there, and you're typically in 4-person teams. 4-person co-ed's the highest level that you compete at. Especially internationally. And when you're there, it's like you're there for so long, everybody has a point where they're struggling on a team, and the team picks that person up. And that's the biggest thing with the teamwork, is working together as a team to get across together. And when somebody's struggling, there's with the top teams, zero issues in somebody struggling. Somebody's sick, somebody's having GI issues, somebody's like hurting, whatever. There's zero type of judgment on that individual, because all of us have done so many hard things. We've been there. And instead, you pick them up, you take their pack, you take weight off them, you put them on tow, so you're towing them behind. And then, maybe 2, 3, 4 hours later, they're feeling much stronger, and now they're back. And then maybe you're the one now that's struggling. And so now it's the reciprocal. And so that teamwork part of, building a network and people around you is huge.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. And then the piece I kind of wanted to kind of close out with here, right? So thinking about a friction point, thinking about a future worry, right? You have to make fact-based decisions, not emotionally based decisions. So making an assumption on something that hasn't even happened yet, if we're going to talk about building that mental resiliency, make decisions based on what is actually a fact. And that's really something that, is very powerful beyond fitness, right? Beyond physical fitness, but how you strengthen your mind. Fernando, do you have any closing comments on these topics that we talked about today?
No, it's like when it comes down to building resiliency as well, it's like you have to understand too that you're human. Like even if you are well prepared, even if you are in the best shape of your life, even if you are going through the business and your study, you did all your research, you did all your business planning, you're still a human. There's still going to be room for error. So like the resiliency part comes along with like, hey, don't strive so much for perfection. Hey, strive for accomplishing what you started. Start with accomplishing what you put into mind too. That was one of the quotes that I was reading this morning in the book, and it was perfect for the podcast as well. So, hey, at the end of the day, you're still a human being, and even though it's not going to be perfect, you can still accomplish what you started. It doesn't matter if it's financially, a business, a physical, whatever you put your mind into. And the way you're going to accomplish that is like by like Vic mentions, hey, work with a team that's been there before. If you work with a person that can show you the way, like black and white, hey man, this is why I did. This is how I did it. This is the problems that I encountered, and this is how I fixed them. And that might not be the way that you fix your own problems, but it might give you a head start. It might give you an idea where to start. So,
absolutely, man. I couldn't agree more with that. So Nick, just want to kind of close it out here. Do you have any final thoughts on resiliency?
I mean, we kind of hit a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
I'd say one last concept is cognitive load, we should talk about. And cognitive load is essentially your mental bandwidth. So a lot of people get burnt out. You see it all the time in the military culture and in corporate cultures and just in general. And burnout is when you're overloading your cognitive side. So you can surge with stress for periods of time, but if it's too long, it's not sustainable. You start to wear down. So the way to look at cognitive load is like, imagine you're filling a cup up, and let's say there's a little hole at the bottom. So picture a sink, right? You're filling the water up. If you're putting more water in than is draining out, it starts to fill and you can handle it for a bit, but then it overflows. So if that water is the cognitive load, there's two ways that you can really address it. One is you can reduce the amount of load that you're taking on. And so that might be things like prioritizing or not doing certain stuff or trying to, reduce everything you have going on. The other side, though, that a lot of people don't know as much about is you have the ability to expand how much load you can take. So you can get better at handling the load you have. So that would be like making the drain bigger or making the tub bigger, right? Or the sink bigger. And so the ways you do that would be, there's a couple things. One is purpose, right? If you have purpose, it doesn't feel like work. And so it's not stressful. And you see that a lot. Another thing is having quality, close relationships with friends or family, like intimate ones with people that you can talk to, you can vent to, you can talk with. So just like the battle buddy, your ranger buddy, your dive buddy, same thing, right? You have somebody who you can lean on when you need it, or just have people who understand you, no judgment that you can talk to. Another thing is socializing just with people, maybe not that intimate, right? But just going out and having a social network of people is huge. So, if you're working so much, you don't get out and see friends ever, like go grab breakfast with friends one morning and like that hour and a half can recharge you a little bit. Another thing is just doing something enjoyable or fun. So, I like mountain biking. If I was to go out every day and spend an hour mountain biking, my whole day is a lot better, right? But my stress levels are lower. So it's kind of like releasing that. So now if you build your life to where, okay, I have very high pressure stress job, but I am finding passion in it, which you may not, right? Like you may not find passion in work, but if you can, that's huge. Or passion in something else. Maybe I'm passionate about the mountain biking. So I go out, I have fun, I enjoy that, and that's not my work, but there's some kind of passion that's motivating you to do stuff. Go out and have fun, whatever fun is. Fun could be playing chess at a chess club or maybe ballroom dancing. It doesn't matter. Do something that's fun, a few times a week or every day, even if it's for a little bit. If it's fun, you're going to have fun every day, and that's going to really help you with your stress levels and ability to handle. And then, the other ones, like get out and socialize with people, have some close, intimate, battle buddies you can lean on. And that's kind of, those couple things are very pivotal, especially transitioning in high stress times of life that can kind of ground you to come back.
Absolutely, man. Wow, what a great conversation we had today. I mean, these really useful tactics and techniques that we can apply to really get out of our minds and get out of our ways, and then just to increase both our mindset, maybe a new job, a new hobby, a new experience. Nick, thank you so much for talking with us today. It was a great conversation. So if people want to get in touch with you, what's the best way for them to reach out to you?
Yeah, you can reach out on email.
Okay.
Nick at rev3endurance.com. And Rev3 is the company I have where I do endurance coaching. It's my primary field, high-level performance coaching, and then race directing. So you can find me through there.
Cool. Well,
Nick,
Fernando, thanks.
I appreciate your time, Nick. I appreciate you taking this 30 minutes and come hang out, come share the conversation with us, man. I know it means a lot, man. A lot of people have stuff going on in their lives, and taking the time here to help out, pushing out the message to veterans and anyone that listens to this podcast. It means a lot, man. I really appreciate it. On the other hand, guys, make sure you like, share, subscribe to this podcast. We have our first event coming on August 23rd. So you can find the link on our Instagram, the Stay Living Foundation. And again, guys, I appreciate you guys taking the time and shooting this episode with us.
All right, we'll see you in the next one.